that's with the Venice Village property. They're holding that. They don't want to sell yet because they're trying to build a new maintenance facility to store all their equipment. And if they don't get approved for the other site, they want to have something else where they can build. The red one, excuse me, we actually just got, oh, sorry. We got a letter from the Liquor Commission saying that they want to open up or transfer a liquor license to that Family Dollar. So today we were working on an email to send. I believe they introduced it as Washington Heights Fresh Market, and we're not with that. We try to talk to the owners and see if we could potentially buy the space, and they wouldn't budge. So we're going to do what we can to try to put our input in. We don't need any more liquor stores. With, I mean,
So tired of liquor battles.
So let's let him finish, and then we'll get to questions by the committee.
I think one thing that was really important to us was we're pointing out to the Liquor Commission that these liquor stores are not naming themselves appropriately. So when we get a piece of literature in the mail, Washington Heights Fresh Market, it's not really what it is, and they need to be changing the names and letting the citizens know that it's actually a liquor store.
Interesting. Thank you very much. So stay close to the mic. Because we might have some questions for you.
I think it would be important too to talk about the environment, your environmental things too that you talked about last time as well. Just because it's partially a residential area.
Yeah, so we've been trying to make sure that we keep everything clean and friendly for everyone. We've had some encounters with some of the community, and we want to be welcoming, but we don't want to overstep our boundaries because we're coming as a new member. So we want to be able to make connections with fellow property owners and residents and kind of get that feedback and use it in our plan to develop the space.
Sounds good. So if committee members can just raise their hand, and so all of us aren't speaking at once. I know we got some great questions out there. And then I'll call on you. I see Mr. Sweet's hand. I think Damon had a hand up, and then I'll go to Heather. So Mr. Sweet first.
Let Damon go first.
You want Damon to go first? Okay.
I have a lot of questions. I have a lot of even understanding this whole process. I guess I still have questions even for, the land bank. How do we get here? I know the things were on them freeze, and now we're looking at certain properties. There's been a lot of talks about a lot of these properties in Washington Heights, period. It's been a very big thing, and that's why freeze was put on. There's been a lot of community members and people interested in a lot of these properties. So I guess my first kind of question would be, when was the application put in for this? Was it during this freeze that we've had?
Yeah, the actual, the interest in this property
Yes.
came in during the pause.
Yes.
So, so we are now presenting it to get it out of the pause.
So I guess that's kind of a concern of mine, is that there have been things that have been on pause prior to this that has not been addressed, other properties, and I'm just wondering why. So I don't want to be controversial at all. Because at the end of the day, Pastor, I love Washington Heights, I love Divine. We've talked about these things. I know what wants to be done, but I have to speak up for the community.
Right.
And talking about inclusion and equity.
Right, well,
And go ahead.
Can I just answer your main question?
Yes, ma'am.
We have 246 properties,
Yes.
and we had to start somewhere,
I agree.
okay? And we've got to start somewhere that we can start bringing case studies to you that make sense. So we can't just jump in and bring all the properties to you. And this one kind of rose to the front because we've actually been working with Hex Design for a very long time through the EPA grant. So while he may have just applied, we've actually been working with Hex Design for a long time. And what we wanted to do was bring case studies to you so we could start taking the committee through the process. And what we've kind of realized is when our board said, okay, we're going to freeze, we don't have to really freeze everything, but we have to make sure that it makes sense. So these are what we would call a direct sale. It's not a side lot, it's a commercially zoned property, so it's not a side lot, right? So it would be a direct sale to him. So we thought this was a good example and a place to start talking. Now, side lots, that's a whole nother group, and that's what we're bringing next month.
Yes.
So
Thank you for the clarity. I'm totally aware of that, and I understand the difference. That's even more important to the community when we're talking, especially talking about commercial properties. We're talking about being able to bring businesses to our community.
Right, and we have commercial properties on the agenda as well tonight.
Okay, I understand, but we're talking about these specifically on Van Buren. You know, and I'm just saying that people have not applied for certain properties because we've been told there's a pause. So people haven't even known to apply. So there's other interest in certain properties that, again, we're talking about inclusion and equity. And if people are told there's a freeze, and nothing's moving, people are not even applying because there's a freeze. But then there's applications being put in during the freeze, and we're now addressing those that's being put in during the freeze when no one's told us that this was even able to happen. So now there's people that are not included to be able to apply for these properties because we didn't know that we could apply for them because there's been a freeze, if I'm making sense. And now, I'll be honest, this feels a little political to me with the way we're doing things right now. And again, I just don't feel like there's been any inclusion and equity in regards to the fairness of it, because again, I respect all business owners. As a Washington Heights resident, and I'm speaking for the Washington Heights community, I've had several meetings being interested about these properties. That's why I've asked for a map of what all properties do we have, side lots and commercial, because people have interest.
Right.
The community wants to buy back our
Right.
community. We want to be able to have black-owned businesses. It's not into any race. Black African-American-owned businesses along Washington Heights in Van Buren. There are none. You know what I mean? And so to have potential commercial properties that's up for grabs, that we're not even told that it's open to apply for these, to have the chance to start getting black businesses back in our community, again, feels a little, not inclusive to me. And so it's, again, not a thing for anybody else when you talk about the process of how we're doing this.
So I think you're asking like whether or not the clear communication is accessible to everybody at the same time.
Can we just pause for a minute because we did have an order that people were going in? So I just wanted to check with the folks that just commented. I know Dr. Johnson just commented. Directly relating to his comment, or are we ready to move on to the other?
No, this is directly related.
Directly related,
Comments
okay.
that have been made.
Yes.
She said that she had to bring us case studies that made sense. So I'm not sure who it made sense to, first of all. And secondly, how can other people who live in the Washington Heights build a relationship just like he did with CCLB so that we can do the same thing he did? And how can we have a dialogue going so that when there is a freeze on, that we can already have our dialogue going with you and we can partner with you? Why was he able to partner during the freeze, but other people weren't able to partner during the freeze?
Well, I think this is getting out of context. So we're asking you tonight, this is one case study because it made sense, because he applied for a side lot because he felt that these were side lots. They're small lots on Van Buren. And this is the progression that happens. It's a first come, first serve. We're asking you later on the agenda, can we list all of our commercially zoned properties under DTL? Because that program works and we feel like they should be listed with our realtor on the market. Why are we holding? It doesn't make sense to hold them. We feel like they should be listed. And so we've got that on here. We're also asking you later this evening, can we put the houses? We only own 2 right now, but when they're ready to go on the market, can we list them under Transform This Home? Because that program also works in this neighborhood. But as we've gone through this and we've had this freeze and we've set up this process and this advisory committee and we've had lots of conversation, you know, we've struggled with how to do this and how to manage this and how to manage the inquiries coming in, because our administrative assistant gets calls every day. And how do we do this and how do we do it fairly? So we're willing to take and hear your comments and conversations, and if we can adjust and we can move it, but I mean, we're doing the best we can, and we're trying to be fair and equitable, and if you think we're not being fair and equitable, and you think we need to list these properties, then you can vote that way when we come to the new business. But it made sense to us that we had a local business owner, that the city was investing, that there was potential here, and, you know, and we're saying this makes sense to us, it may not make sense to you, and you've got a good point. The other ones we want to list with our realtor, and we always try and list stuff with our realtor, but, you know, there may be some stumbles here, and that's okay. You know, we're really trying to figure it out, but we don't feel like we need to continue to freeze all their properties, but we do need to have these conversations, and that's why we're saying to you, next month we're going to bring some vacant land to you, because we feel that's like a really big chunk that needs to be discussed. But we got a lot of commercial sites in section 1 that we feel we need to list. So that's kind of where we are.
I'm gonna go back to Damon and then come back to you.
Yeah, so real quick, just for clarity. So as representatives of Washington Heights, and we are taking this information back to the people, what do we tell them in regards to the freeze? I hear you, and I appreciate what you're saying. I hear you say that there's first come, first served, and it doesn't really feel like that in this situation. That was first come, first served, because there was a freeze, and so nobody knew they could even apply. And there was an application that was applied during the freeze, and so if someone would have knew that, hey, you can still put applications in, even though there's a freeze, people may have still have done that. So they didn't do it not knowing it. So now, you said there's gonna be vacant land, the vacant lots coming open, that you're gonna present to us next month. So what do we tell the people? Is it back open for people to start applying?
Yeah, we've been really trying to get that process down, and I think we just figured it out yesterday. We're taking statements of interest.
Statements of interest?
Interest, yes.
And that's the normal process that we had to go through before, right? You do a
Well,
statement of
no,
interest.
so what's been happening, and so, you know, we've really been, okay, so we've been setting up this, we got all of our other work going on, and we're getting calls all the time, because, you know, people are applying and people are calling us. People are not calling us because they think there's a freeze on, so that's not what's happening in our office. People are definitely calling us because we've had side lots for a really long time and we haven't moved on them. So bringing this here for you guys is our way of saying, hey, like, people have been waiting and we need to do something, and how are we going to do it? And this is how we thought would be a good way to start. So what we decided this week is when people call, we would take a statement of interest. Then it would go to Amy and Jamie. And Amy, Rose, and Jamie would take it and they would look how it sits within the overall context of the neighborhood, because they've already visited all 246 properties and they've made a recommendation based on their visit. You know, some lots are side lots. They got a shared driveway, or the neighbor's parking on it because they got a really tiny lot, or the trampoline is on it, or something like that. And then we're going to bring those to you. And we're going to try and get a better metric for what really makes a side lot. That's something we need to kind of revisit, and that's a whole can of worms. I don't want to totally go down it today because folks have other things they probably need to get to. But that statement of interest will start the process, because folks feel like they've been waiting a long, long time. So what's the land bank doing? So we're trying to get that process moving, and we're trying to pick some of those things that just make sense, where programs are working. Or that commercial property, you know, we got that entrepreneurial money out there. You know, we got some EPA money. Our EPA money is pretty much used right now, but there's another grant in the area that's working. So we want to get that back on the market, and we would list it with our realtor, and we would put it out there. So we're trying to get this statement of interest, and then we're also trying to set up a timeline so that if folks really want to come before this committee, it has to be in a certain day, a certain number of days before this committee meeting.
I just want to say this last thing, that as a member of this community, I'm 44 years old, born and raised in Washington Heights. I've seen a lot of our property, a lot of commercial property bought up by outside entities, especially when we're talking about Van Buren, West Michigan. Look at that area right there. Again, we talk about monopolizing certain areas and us not being included. From this area, I've had interest in these properties. But if I'm being told there's a freeze and I can't apply, I'm not going to apply. But then turn around, I hear that someone else has applied during the freeze, and now we're looking at their application. Just doesn't feel fair because again, I and myself and other people have had interest in these commercial properties to try to bring more black businesses to our community to be able to hire our community and things of that nature. So again, it's just a process of how it's being handled like right now.
We appreciate your comments.
Thank you. Arnice?
I think David said mostly my sentiments, but I did want to say, I know this is a hard process. I know it's something that you've taken on and have built this advisory committee so that we can have input. But I don't think that during these types of sessions, that people understand the historical perspective for everything that's going on. And that's why he's saying this. And it has to be looked at whether you want to or not. I mean, there is no black businesses. Now, he's 42, I'm 67. I remember when there were black businesses, and now there's none. So we're always being pushed out of the areas, and we become consumers, but we're not contributing. So these types of conversations have to be had. And it's not easy. So I would like to know how he built a relationship with you, and he's partnered with you, but there was a freeze on. So we can tell other people in our community how to build those same relationships, so when you bring the next case study, it will be somebody that we're interested in moving into that area. And you have to look at it like America is. I mean, everybody wants, that's why I don't serve on a lot of boards, because everybody wants to discount what's really going on. And it's not just going on in Battle Creek, it's going on in our country. So there's historical perspective as to why people aren't owning things anymore. And whether, the people that on the land bank committee, on the land bank board, want to admit it or not, I'm not going to stop saying it. Because unless you give us an opportunity to own in these areas and to start our businesses, we're going to be counted out like it has always been. There's no more black businesses.
And it's nothing towards them, you know what I mean?
It's not towards anybody, it's not personal.
They just say they've been here since November.
Well, I mean,
I've been here 44 years.
he got an EPA grant. Other members of this committee have gotten EPA grants as well, and they applied for them, just like other people across the county have applied for them. And if anybody who's received financing from the land bank under our EPA program wants to talk about that, then you may talk about that. But
So I think at this time, we're just trying to get clarity and offer input on the application before us. So this is discussion time. I think we've had the points brought up. We also, still have the applicants here. So if we have any additional questions, I think it's coming back to Mr. Sweet and to Ms. Rance. So, Mr. Sweet.
I think I'm going to just go ahead and hold it up because I can talk the rest of the night. And a lot of this, that's why I let Damon go ahead of me.
Okay.
Because a lot of what I have to say is going to surround what Damon's talked about. It's going to go off to left field.
Okay. So
I'm
similar
not,
concerns to
no, it's not similar, but it's going to get deep, what I'm going to say.
Okay.
But I'm kind of just trying to figure out a time when I can we all sit down and talk about this rationally, because this is a can of worms right here.
Well, it'll always, as far as this committee, because we have to have our meetings in public, so.
Okay, I ain't got no problem. I ain't not looking for separate meetings.
Yeah.
We can go on White House ground and talk about what I gotta talk about. But what I'm saying is, we got a real big lack of communication here. You're not utilizing this committee like it should be utilized. And I'm not faulting the land bank for this, but I told and talked to people in the land bank who was going to get to this point where a lot of questions can't be answered. You're dealing with more than just these properties. You're dealing with a section, and you're dealing with a lot of streets here. You're crossing a lot of boundaries that you can't account for You got about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 streets.
I mean, if anybody has a
You got-
suggestion,
I'm just
how you
saying,
want
I'm
us to
just
do
saying,
it,
I'm just saying.
let us know.
I'm just saying, but I can sit here and go on and on and on. This guy here is inheriting something, he doesn't even know what he's inheriting. You guys are selling property to people, you know, that shouldn't even be sold to these people, or even be considered sold to them, because you don't know no background, what are you giving them? Or selling these people?
Well, we're in the the discussion part, so it's really what this committee wants to do. It's not what,
That's what I'm
they're
saying.
making this, they're presenting it to us, and
So